This happened last year, and I still can't shake it off. I am hesitant about sharing it because I feel like people are going to say I'm making this up, but I swear to you, every word is true. I was driving home from my college friend's place, and it was late, like ungodly hour kind of late. I'm talking 1:30 a.m., on one of those back roads where there's nothing but trees and the occasional deer staring at you like it's judging your life choices. I had my music on low because I didn't want to freak myself out, but the road was so dark it didn't even matter. It was just me, my little beat-up Civic, and miles of empty road. Or so I thought. About 20 minutes into the drive, I see this guy standing next to a truck on the shoulder. His hood's up, like the truck broke down or something, and he's waving his arms like he's trying to flag me down. Now, I'm not stupid. I've listened to enough true crime podcasts to know that stopping for random people on the side of the road at night is how you end up on a missing persons poster. But something about him made me hesitate. He looked desperate, like really desperate. Plus, I felt bad because the truck looked ancient, like it hadn't run since the 90s. I slowed down just a little and cracked my window as I rolled by. The guy jogs up to my car, all sweaty and out of breath, and he's holding this giant wrench in his hand. Sketchy, right? But in the moment, I was just like, okay, maybe he was fixing his truck. He leans down to my window, and his eyes are, I don't know how to explain it. They weren't just tired. They looked dead inside, like he hadn't slept in days. He tells me his phone's dead and asks if I can give him a ride to the nearest gas station. Here's the thing. I'm usually nice, unhealthy amount of being nice, but something in my gut was screaming, no. I told him I didn't have room, even though my car was practically empty. He just stared at me for a second, and I swear his expression changed. Like he went from helpless to pissed in the blink of an eye. He didn't say anything, just backed up a step and stared at me as I rolled up the window and drove off. I felt a little guilty, but not enough to stop. I kept checking my rearview mirror, and for a while, it was just darkness behind me. Then, out of nowhere, I see headlights. At first, I thought it was just another car, but the way they sped up really disturbed me. They were getting closer, really fast. Now, I'm not the kind of person who automatically assumes the worst, but this dude wasn't just following me. He was tailgating me so close I couldn't even see his headlights anymore. I sped up, hoping he'd pass me or turn off somewhere. But no, every time I accelerated, he did too. I even took a random swerve just to see if it was a coincidence. But nope, he swerved a little too. He was still there, practically glued to my bumper. At this point, I was full on panicking. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. I kept thinking, what does he want? What did I do? But then it hit me. This wasn't random. This was the guy from the truck. I don't know how he got his truck running or how he caught up so fast, but it was definitely him. I tried calling 911, but of course my phone had little to no signal. I just kept driving, praying I'd see another car or a gas station. Anything. But there was nothing. Just trees and more trees. And the guy behind me, flashing his high beams now like he wanted to blind me. Then he did the scariest thing. He started ramming my car. Not hard enough to send me off the road, but enough to make me swerve. I don't know if he was trying to scare me or force me to stop, but I wasn't about to find out. I floored it, even though my little Civic isn't exactly built for speed. Finally, I saw lights up ahead. A gas station. Felt like salvation. I veered into the lot so fast my tires screeched and slammed on the horn, hoping anyone, would come outside. The guy behind me slammed on his brakes, stopped for a second like he was deciding what to do, and then just drove and sped off into the darkness. When I got out of the car, my legs were jelly. The clerk at the gas station came out, and I told him what happened. He just nodded like this wasn't the first time he'd heard something like it. He said there'd been reports of a guy targeting anybody on that stretch of road, pretending to need help, and then following them when they didn't stop. Let me start by saying I'm not the type of person who stops for strangers. Ever. I've watched way too many scary YouTube videos and listened to way too many true crime podcasts to think that's a good idea. But this one night, I made an exception, and I swear, it's the dumbest thing I've ever done. It happened a couple of months ago. I was driving home after visiting my parents, and it was already dark. My GPS had me on this long, empty highway because it was the fastest route. There were no streetlights, no other cars, just me and miles of nothing. The kind of road where if something happened, you'd probably just get eaten by coyotes before anyone found you. So, I'm driving, zoning out to my playlist, when I see this van on the side of the road with its hazard lights on. I swear it came out of nowhere. Like 1 second the road was empty, and the next, bam, there's this van. And standing next to it was a woman holding a baby. She was waving her arms like crazy, trying to get me to stop. Now, every part of my brain was screaming, "Don't stop, keep driving." But then I saw her face. She looked desperate, like on the verge of tears, desperate. And she had a baby. Who fakes something like that, right? I told myself, okay, I'll stop for 2 seconds, but I'm not getting out of the car. I pulled over and rolled my window down just a crack, enough to hear her. She rushed over to my car, holding the baby, and started rambling about how her van wouldn't start. Her phone was dead, and she needed a ride to the nearest diner. She was soaked from head to toe, like she'd been standing out there for hours, and the baby was wrapped in this old, ratty blanket, maybe shivering. I felt awful. I told her I could call for a tow truck, but she shook her head and said, "Please, just a ride. It's only a couple miles up the road." I hesitated, but the way she looked at me, I don't know. I guess I felt like I couldn't just leave her there with a baby in the middle of nowhere. So I unlocked the doors and let her in. She climbed into the back seat, still holding the baby, and kept thanking me over and over. I asked her where the diner was, and she pointed up the road, saying it was just straight ahead. The whole time, I could hear the baby making these little noises, like it was cold or uncomfortable. I tried making small talk, asking what happened to her van, but she gave these super vague answers. Like, oh, it just stopped running. Something about the way she said it felt off, but I figured she was just stressed. A few minutes into the drive, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and that's when I noticed something weird. The blanket the baby was wrapped in, it wasn't wet, like not even a little. This woman was soaked, her hair was dripping, but the blanket looked dry. I thought maybe I was imagining things, so I glanced back again, and this time, I noticed the baby wasn't moving. I felt this wave of dread hit me. I told myself, it's just sleeping, calm down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. Then, out of nowhere, the woman started shifting in her seat, almost like she was uncomfortable. I glanced back, and that's when I saw it. She wasn't holding the baby anymore. She was holding something long, wrapped in the blanket. My heart dropped. I couldn't tell what it was, but it definitely wasn't a baby. I started freaking out internally, trying to stay calm. I asked her, "Everything okay back there?" She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, clutching that thing in the blanket. I knew I had to get her out of my car, but I didn't want to panic her or give her a reason to do something crazy. So, I lied and said, "Oh crap, I think I forgot my wallet at the gas station back there. I'm gonna pull over real quick and check there." She didn't say anything, just nodded slowly. As soon as I pulled over, I put the car in park and turned around to look at her. My voice was shaking, but I said, "I need you to step out for a second while I check the back seat." That's when she finally looked at me, and her expression was blank, like no emotion at all. She hesitated for a second, then slowly opened the door and got out. The second she was out, I hit the lock button and floored it. I didn't even care if I was being rude. I just wanted to get out of there. I looked in my rearview mirror as I sped off, and she was just standing there, holding the blanket, watching me drive away. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. I kept replaying it in my head. trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But the next day, I saw a post online about people using fake babies to lure drivers into stopping so they can rob or attack them. They'll wrap a crowbar or a weapon in a blanket and pretend it's a baby. I still don't know what her intentions were, but I know for a fact that wasn't a real baby. And I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't trusted my gut and gotten her out of my car. This happened when I was 23, and honestly, I still can't believe how close I came to being killed. I drive trucks for a living, long hauls mostly, and this happened on one of those late-night runs through the middle of nowhere. If you've ever driven in the boonies at night, you know how creepy it is. No lights, no cars, just endless darkness and the hum of your engine. I usually don't mind it, but that night was different. So, it was around 2 a.m., and I was about 2 hours out from my drop-off. The route I was on was a 2-lane highway cutting through some rural area. Trees on both sides, no towns for miles. I was cruising along, trying to stay awake, when I saw something up ahead on the road. At first, I thought it was just a car parked weirdly, but as I got closer, I realized it was a sedan sitting sideways across both lanes with its hazard lights on. I slowed down, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Standing next to the car were two guys, one of them waving his arms like he needed help. Now look, I'm not dumb. I know people pull shady stuff on highways all the time, especially at night. My first thought was, this is a setup. Don't stop. But I also didn't want to assume the worst. What if they really needed help? Their car could have broken down, or maybe there was an accident. So, I slowed down even more but didn't come to a full stop. As I got closer, I noticed a few things that immediately sent my anxiety through the roof. First, the guy waving his arms wasn't injured or panicked. He looked calm. Too calm for someone supposedly stranded in the middle of the road at 2 a.m. Second, the other guy wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there, leaning against the car, watching me. It was creepy as hell. And third, and this is what really freaked me out, I noticed a second car parked just off the road, hidden in the shadows of the trees. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a couple of guys with car trouble. This was a trap. I can't explain how I knew, but my gut was screaming at me to get out of there. I slowed my truck almost to a crawl, angling it slightly so I'd have room to get around the sedan without stopping. As I passed them, the guy waving his arms suddenly stepped closer, like he was about to try something. I didn't even think. I slammed on the horn, leaned on it for a good 5 seconds, and floored it. My truck roared past them, barely squeezing by the sedan. In my mirror, I saw the two guys running toward the hidden car. At this point, my heart was racing, and I knew I had to stay ahead of them. I pressed down on the gas, praying my truck could outrun whatever they were driving. A few seconds later, I saw their headlights in the distance, getting closer. Now, this is where it gets even worse. These guys weren't just following me, they were chasing me. Their car was gaining on me fast, swerving back and forth like they were trying to intimidate me. I grabbed my CB radio and started calling out for help, hoping another trucker was nearby. Thankfully, a guy responded almost immediately. He said he was about 5 miles ahead and would pull over to block the road. The car behind me was tailgating so close I thought they were going to ram me. I kept my truck steady, focusing on the road, until I saw the guy who'd answered my call. His rig was parked sideways across the road, blocking both lanes. He was out of his truck, holding what looked like a tire iron. When the car chasing me saw the blockade, they slammed on the brakes and skidded to a stop. For a second, I thought they might try to ram through, but instead, they threw it into reverse and peeled off into the woods. I pulled over next to the other trucker, still shaking. He asked if I was okay, and I told him what happened. He just shook his head and said, "This ain't the first time I've heard of something like this out here." I reported the incident to the cops, but they didn't seem all that interested. They just said they'd patrol the area, which, let's be honest, probably didn't happen. I don't know what those guys wanted, maybe to rob me, maybe something worse, but I'm just glad I trusted my gut and didn't stop. Now, every time I'm on a long-haul drive at night, I keep my CB radio on and my doors locked.
She's in here with us, my friend. We are legion.